Welcome back to the deep dive. In our world today, information just, it absolutely surges everywhere.
It really does. And narratives can catch on incredibly fast.
Exactly. Some stick, some get labeled completely false. And today we're looking right at that intersection.
hmm
We're diving into Pizzagate. It's a controversial conspiracy theory that really blew up online.
And our mission here, for you listening, is to unpack the claims and the, quote, evidence presented in one very specific piece of source material.
Okay.
It's an audio recording titled President Trump Opens Investigation into #Pizzagate Pedophile Ring .mp3
Right.
from a host called The Voice of Reason on somewhere called Right Wing News. So we're sticking just to what's in this recording.
Got it.
Good.
Examining how it frames things, what it says, what it wants listeners to think and maybe do.
Precisely. How it builds its case using only what's presented there.
Okay, so let's get into it. The host, this voice of reason, he starts off sounding, well, pretty hopeful.
Yeah, he describes a speech by President Trump as one of the more powerful speeches he'd heard from a president in his lifetime. Gave him a lot of hope, he says.
So a strong emotional reaction right off the bat.
Definitely. And he immediately links that hope to the core claim of the recording,
Which is?
that President Trump announced he's putting the full force of the United States federal government behind digging into a D.C. pedophile network.
So not just a general policy announcement, but a direct investigation into this specific alleged network.
Yeah, it's exactly how the source frames it, a direct response.
And the source gives a reason why this happened now.
It does, and this is interesting. It points straight to Ivanka Trump.
Oh.
Yeah, claims she was, and I quote, responsible for the sudden Trump administration's attention to what the source calls a pedophilia epidemic. Says she urged her father.
Any, proof offered for that?
Well, the source mentions an alleged Twitter post, supposedly Ivanka in the Oval Office with Trump and some NGOs, tasked with eradicating the stench of human trafficking and pedophilia.
Eradicating the stench. Strong language.
Very. It really paints a picture, connecting a prominent figure directly to the issue as framed by the source.
Okay, so Ivanka's influence is claimed. Then what about Trump's actual words, according to this recording?
The source quotes him, apparently committing to make solving the human trafficking epidemic a priority.
A priority. Okay.
And directing DOJ, Homeland Security, other agencies to take a hard look at the resources and personnel they have on it, and crucially, to devote more.
So a call for increased resources.
That's the claim.
But then the voice of reason, he sort of manages expectations a bit, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. It's quite strategic. He says, even if the major players aren't caught,
Right.
this investigation could potentially severely limit the amount of human trafficking and maybe save a handful of children's lives.
So even a small outcome is presented as a win, validating the whole thing.
Exactly. It frames any potential result, big or small, as positive confirmation.
Okay, so that's the setup. The hope, the alleged action, the influence. What next?
Well, then he tackles the skepticism head on.
Yeah.
He brings up fake news.
Yes. The inevitable fake news counter.
Right. He says Pizzagate is seen as the gold standard of fake news by people like Bill O'Reilly or Bernie Goldberg, mainstream figures.
But he pushes back.
Oh, yeah. He basically says the information isn't hard to find. It's not fake just because the mainstream isn't covering it.
And he challenges the critics.
Directly.
Yeah.
Asks if they've actually looked into any of the leads. Puts the burden of proof back on them.
Does he say what looking into the leads means exactly?
Not explicitly, no.
Ah.
But the implication is that he has, and they haven't. It positions him as the diligent one.
Right. And speaking of him having looked into it, he talks about his own history with the topic.
He mentions he's touched on Pizzagate before. Lists some pretty provocative article titles he supposedly wrote.
Like what?
Things like U.S. State Department tied a child trafficking operation with billionaire Jeffrey Epstein, one of Bill Clinton's friends.
Okay.
And globalists are pedophiles. What are their practices and their beliefs? And even one suggesting Andrew Breitbart was on to Pizzagate just before he, quote, was murdered.
Wow. Okay. So he's establishing his credentials, his long-term involvement in these narratives.
Precisely. Using his past work to bolster his current claims.
But then he explains why he hasn't focused on it more recently. That seems counterintuitive.
It does, but he frames it strategically.
Yeah.
He says YouTube gives channels covering Pizzagate a lot of trouble, and Facebook bans him every other day. So he says he chooses not to harp on that one too much.
Why?
To ensure a lot more messages get out. It's presented as a tactical decision to avoid censorship, not as a lack of conviction or evidence.
So the alleged suppression becomes proof of the message's importance.
You got it. He also throws in a personal note about not covering 9/11 conspiracies, says it's too close to home, mentions friends who died in the towers.
Adds a layer of personal vulnerability, maybe.
Perhaps. Or just another strategic element in building his persona.
Okay, so after all that framing, what about the actual evidence presented in this recording for Pizzagate itself?
Right, let's get into that. He highlights what he calls one of the most damning pieces of evidence.
Which is?
An email, supposedly from Cheryl Mills, Hillary Clinton's assistant, to John Podesta.
Okay, what does the email allegedly say?
According to the source, Mills wrote she was excited to go home to do a sacrifice to Moloch in her backyard.
A sacrifice!
Yeah, and specifically mentions a live chicken.
Moloch.
Moloch.
Huh.
The source describes Moloch as an ancient pagan god of child sacrifice.
Wow, okay. That's quite a claim based on an email mentioning a chicken.
It is. And, for context, while Moloch is in ancient texts, the whole direct child sacrifice link is heavily debated by scholars, often seen more metaphorically. But the source presents it very literally.
And he expects people to just accept that interpretation.
He challenges skeptics directly, says good luck explaining that as just coincidence, especially given the context of the trafficking accusations.
A rhetorical move to corner the listener.
Definitely. He's basically saying, see, it has to be sinister.
Does he offer other evidence?
Yeah, he broadens out. He brings up Bohemian Grove.
The infamous retreat.
Right. Describes it as the meeting place for prior presidents and uber elites. Names Cheney, the Butches.
And the connection is?
Claims it's a site for huge ceremonies dedicated to this particular former ancient pagan god, Moloch again.
Okay.
He even mentions Alex Jones, saying Jones broke in there and broken stories about it, tying in another figure known for these kinds of narratives.
So, linking elites, pagan gods, and secret ceremonies.
That's the picture being painted. Then he pivots again.
To what?
Something called spirit cooking.
Right. I remember that term popping up.
He mentions an unnamed celibard celebrity, presumably who invited John Podesta over to do some spirit cooking.
And how does he explain that?
He doesn't, really. He just tells the listener to Google it. Google what spirit cooking is.
Outsourcing the explanation, but implying it's obviously nefarious.
Exactly. Then asks, again, tell me how none of this is worth looking into, putting the onus back on the listener after just dropping the term.
And for our listeners, spirit cooking actually refers to a performance art piece, right, by Marina Abramovich. It got twisted in these theories.
That's correct. Often completely mischaracterized. But the source just uses the provocative name.
Are there other connections mentioned? Just briefly?
Yeah, he alludes back to Jeffrey Epstein, his link to Bill Clinton. Mentions claims about Hollywood elite, like Elijah Wood, supposedly coming out about pedophilia. It's all woven together.
So a collection of names, places, and terms, all presented as interconnected evidence.
A web of associations.
And he emphasizes the verifiability of some of this.
Yes, specifically the Cheryl Mills email. He stresses that that email is real, and you can find it on WikiLeaks yourself.
Okay, pointing to a specific source.
Right. And he contrasts that with what he calls actual fake news, like, say, stories about GOP senators taking money from George Soros. He claims those stories don't exist on WikiLeaks.
Interesting. So using WikiLeaks as the arbiter of truth for his claim, while dismissing other potential WikiLeaks content that doesn't fit. But is that Mills email really the only piece he offers that kind of specific verification for?
It seems to be the main one he flags for direct public verification in this recording. It's positioned as the anchor, the really damning piece you can check yourself. The other connections are more asserted or alluded to.
Right, a selective focus on the seemingly verifiable part.
This is a common rhetorical technique.
So after laying out all this, the claims, the evidence, the challenges, how does he wrap it up? What does he want people to do?
He issues a pretty clear call to action. First, he tells listeners to discern whether or not it's believable themselves.
Okay, decide for yourself.
But then, strongly encourages sharing it. Share it everywhere on social media. Why? Because, quote, he who controls the information controls.
Right. Become part of the information war, essentially.
Exactly. He also asks them to sign up for updates from him, leave comments, engage.
And his final justification for all this?
It's quite telling. He says most informed people are going to be able to deduce that 1 and 1 equals 2. That where there's smoke, there's fire.
Implying it's obvious if you just connect the dots he's laid out.
And that mainstream media will never cover it, so it's up to his audience to spread the word.
Okay, so we've really dug into this one specific source, the Voice of Reason, looked at the narrative it builds around Pizzagate.
Yeah, we've unpacked the claims about Trump, Ivanka, the alleged investigation.
The specific pieces of evidence, like the Mills email, Bohemian Grove, spirit cooking.
And also how he presents it. The appeals to hope, the framing of censorship, the challenges to skeptics, the call to action.
It really shows how a particular viewpoint can be constructed and argued, doesn't it? Using very specific, sometimes verifiable, sometimes just asserted pieces of information.
Absolutely. And it highlights the power of framing, especially when a narrative runs counter to mainstream understanding.
So reflecting on this, for you listening, it raises a pretty important question, I think. When you encounter a source like this one that's passionate, detailed, claims hidden truths, and urges you to discern for yourself while simultaneously telling you what to conclude, how do you approach that?
Yeah, what does this deep dive into one specific recording suggest about navigating today's information landscape? Especially the challenge of sorting fact from assertion, verification from just strong claims, when the message is designed to be so compelling.